Future Digital. So as you can see from the screen, that's our agenda for the day. It's been kind of pushed back a bit because we've had some, it's taken a bit longer to get everyone in than we had thought. But now we'll start off with myself and the co-coordinator, Rakshinda, explaining the campaign and talking about what we have in store. So obviously a big part of the campaign was this webinar. So we are very excited to say that we had at least 88 registrations for today, and over half of them came, which is amazing. We didn't expect this at all. So thank you to everybody that came today. And if you are not able to watch the whole thing today, remember we are recording this and we'll hopefully be posting it on our YouTube. So if you miss anything, you can go back and watch it there. And so that was the biggest thing about our campaign, this webinar. And as a part of this, we wanted a professional to speak on the cyclones and make sure that that we're not just getting our information from unreliable sources. So we have the amazing Dr. Ilan Kelman here today to talk about, tell us a bit about cyclones in South Asia and its connection to climate change and his area of expertise. And then another thing that we kind of focused on was our social media posts. So a lot of you probably have seen about our webinar from our Instagram or our Twitter or anything, or any of our social media platforms. So so every day this week we've had different posts gone up about our campaign. So we've had, on Monday we launched, on Tuesday we talked about the research we gathered and what is Cyclone Tauktae. And then on Wednesday, yesterday, we did a post. I'm not quite sure what that post is about, but on Thursday, today is Friday. So yesterday on Thursday, we had our post go up about our webinar, and then today we have an amazing post gone up about our toolkit. So Iris has sent in the links to our social medias there, so you can all check them out after this. And then another thing that we had was our toolkit that Rakshinda will be talking about. And then I think that's all from me, and enjoy the webinar, and I'll be back in a few minutes to talk to Dr. Ilan.
Welcome all, I'm Rakshinda and I have coordinated this campaign. So with Heather and our amazing FFD team. So talking about our toolkit, it's very based on a thorough research, and there is a petition where we are demanding climate education for people, or for young people in the state of West Bengal, in their own language. This petition was started by Arindam Roy, so I hope that you guys just sign that petition and help him raise his voice together with us in demanding the climate education for everyone in their own language. And we have also partnered with an NGO called Go Dharmic, where we are supporting, it's called disaster relief work in India, and we are supporting all the relocated people from Cyclone Tauktae or Yas or any other disasters that India has suffered in the recent years, or in these years alone, from the flash flood and droughts and everything else, providing them foods, blankets, medical supplies, shelter, and whatever we can provide them. So I hope that we will support the fundraiser, and that's all.
And then just a small bit about like our kind of cause of this campaign. So in Fridays Future Digital, we noticed that there was an increased amount and there was an enhancement in the amount of cyclones and the effect that cyclones have had in South Asia. So we came up with the idea of the campaign Cyclone Tauktae. So the main kind of aim of this campaign is to raise awareness about the increasement and the enhancement of cyclones in South Asia, and not just to people that, like me, I'm from Ireland, so this wasn't covered on my news. It wasn't covered on many news medias across the world. So it is important that we know that climate change is happening now, and it is there. Scientists have proven that there has been a coalition between the enhancement in cyclones and climate change. So that's was kind of the aim of our campaign, to raise awareness, not just to people that aren't affected, but people that are affected. And we all know that climate change will affect us all at some point. So we all need to join the fight against it. So the next thing to get us started then, to continue us, is a chat with Dr. Ilan Kelman. So I'll pass the floor off to him and he can talk about area of expertise around cyclones.
Good, Heather, and thank you everyone for being here and for joining us. And hopefully this will be helpful, this will be useful as a discussion. I've put my contact details in the chat. So Heather and I have been communicating via Twitter direct messaging, but really it's whatever works for you, even the older technology of email, if that's suitable. This should not stop here. It's wonderful work that you're all doing on Fridays, but there are 6 other days of the week and you do continue it irrespective of the day, which means that we can continue our exchange, our discussion, our thinking, but more importantly, most importantly, our action, no matter what the day, and thinking that unfortunately there are expected to be further cyclone disasters, further disasters continuing, including, for example, the fires outside of Athens, which are causing problems today, and also the fires in southern Turkey, which are causing problems today. So this is a lifelong campaign for action. It is lifelong improvement, and it is all up to us to continue exchanging, thinking, acting, joining with each other, learning and exchanging with each other in order to do better and to create the future which we are seeking. To get to that future, part of that is also thinking about where we come from. So sure, my social media details are in the chat, but what is my position? Why am I actually here? And my title is Professor of Disasters and Health at University College London. I'm also affiliated with the University of Agder in Southern Norway, so sort of both the UK and Norway. At University College London, I'm in 2 institutes, the Institute for Risk and Disaster Reduction, the Disasters Institute, and the Institute for Global Health, Health Institute. So the idea is to bring together disasters and health. Disasters unfortunately kill people, injure them, cause mental health, psychological difficulties, and can lead to potentially creating worse disease, worse food, worse water, all of which have physical and mental health impacts. So connecting disasters and health has many different approaches or many different bridges. One of them is climate change and trying to integrate climate change into different aspects of disasters and health. So in addition to the research which we do, in addition to the media engagement and social media which we do, we teach. We have master's programs. So in my Disasters Institute, we have several master programs. You become a Master of Disaster or Disaster Master. And we also in September are starting the UK's first undergraduate degree related to humanitarianism. This is a Bachelor of Science in Global Humanitarian Studies, a 3-year undergraduate degree. So if you are interested in these wider humanitarianism, disasters, catastrophe, climate change questions, then consider the undergraduate degree, consider the master's degree, consider a PhD, and then you could become an academic just like me, which might not be an incentive. So just think about doing a PhD for yourself. Similarly, in our Global Health Institute, we run masters in global health, and we teach undergraduates if they're in the medical school. So in the United Kingdom, medical school, becoming a doctor is your first degree, and you generally take 1 year out in the middle of the heavy clinical aspect to do something different regarding health. And that's where it could be 1 year with us looking at global health, health and development, health within the social construct, rather than just examining dead bodies and trying to work out how the body works and does not work. So this is really what you're here for, right? A school strike does not mean an education strike. It does not mean a learning strike, and it certainly never means a teaching strike with you teaching each other and you teaching us. Because talking, teaching just doesn't work unless we're all learning together. And it's impossible for me to stand up in front of a classroom or in front of Zoom without actually learning and exchanging. So that just means that I'm going to present some thoughts regarding the cyclone, regarding its link to climate change, also extended and connected to other aspects of storm disasters and their connections or lack thereof to climate change, and then hopefully segue into discussion where you teach me and you challenge me and we work together to really understand, well, what are the issues? And not just thinking, not just talking, but what does it mean? So what? How can we act? What should we be doing? In order to do so, our role as scientists, our role as university professionals, our role as academics is to encourage evidence-based discussion. We prefer policies, laws, legislation, recommendations, actions based on the evidence. Part of that is all the evidence isn't always available. We need to make decisions under poor information. We need to make decisions under uncertainty, and we do that all the time. Oh, should I take an umbrella today? Should I even go out today, given the rising COVID-19 cases in London? So we're doing this all the time. Lack of evidence is not an excuse for lack of action. But ignoring evidence is even worse. And failing to account for the science, failing to account for the facts, failing to account for the evidence is simply going to take us down the wrong path. So we start with the basics. And what do we know about the cyclone? Well, we know the dates it struck, we know the location it struck. I assume you have that information, which is why you're here. It had sustained winds of up to 185 kilometers per hour with 1 minute gusts, that is gusts over the time of 1 minute, of up to 230 kilometers an hour. That's fast. Faster than I can run. Certainly faster than most speed limits in countries which have speed limits. But yet it's equivalent to only a Category 3 hurricane, maybe getting into Category 4, which in itself is an interesting statement. When we talk about a hurricane, a cyclone, or a typhoon, it is the same type of storm. It's just a different name. The reason it's given a different name is because it depends where in the world it happens. So if you hear cyclone, hurricane, or typhoon, it's exactly the same. It just has happened in a different location. And all three of those come under the category called tropical cyclone. So hurricanes, cyclones, typhoons are tropical cyclones, same type of storm. There's a bizarre scale which has 5 categories. And it's called the Saffir-Simpson scale, after Saffir and Simpson, who invented it, which categorizes each tropical cyclone according to wind speed. The highest category is Category 5. So as devastating as this cyclone was, it was really only at the edge of Cyclone 3 and 4, sort of high 3, maybe into 4, Category 4. It was not the strongest possible. It was far from the strongest that we've witnessed. It was the 5th strongest storm measured in the Arabian Sea. Only the 5th, not even close to the 1st. And our reliable records don't go back that far. Because if a storm does not come near land, then we either need a ship nearby, which might not be very healthy for the ship, or we're measuring it via airplane or satellite. And we've not had airplanes flying into hurricanes for very long, only about 70 years. And we've not had satellites for very long. Again, sort of on the same order of time. So it's very hard to determine the trends of these storms in a particular location when we don't have comparative data, when we don't have comparative ways of measuring. Certainly the places where the cyclone made landfall have been inhabited for thousands of years. They have a deep, rich knowledge, a deep, rich understanding of storms, but the measurement approach may not always be comparable for good or bad. And it's not about judging. It's not saying one is better or one is worse. It's just saying it's a different way of observing. It's a different way of measuring. So it can be hard to compare a satellite measurement to traditional knowledge, which has been passed down over generations for 700 years. And the satellites might be wrong. In fact, the satellites are often wrong compared to local knowledge. Our technology often cannot match the deep understanding and deep history which people who are affected disasters have about their place of living. On the other hand, if you have lived in a place for generations, you still do not know what's going on deep in the earth. You still do not know what you cannot see over the horizon. You still do not know what happened a million years ago in that place. So it's about bringing together knowledges. It's not about judging one or the other. It's not saying that, oh, modern science is so much better than what these strange people think. No, it's about us working together and learning together and recognizing that for Arabian Sea tropical cyclones, we simply do not have a good record or a good understanding of their strength, of their intensity, of when they happen. This cyclone was also labeled as being the strongest to hit the west coast of India. Interesting statement, because why do we confine our comparison to the west coast of India, as opposed to, say, the place of origin, the Arabian Sea? And again, we have to think about the length of the record in terms of how long the data go back, what we are comparing to. So even when we say it was the fifth strongest in the Arabian Sea since actually 1998, so if we go back further, it drops down that rank. If we say it's the strongest to hit the west coast of India, then that may or may not be a meaningful statement. And we'll certainly come back to this year, 1998, because that's very intriguing when we think about how tropical cyclones might have changed. These are some of the baseline facts or the evidence, but I've so far talked only about the cyclone. I've not talked about the cyclone disaster. A storm is a storm. No big issue. If you have an umbrella, you're not going to get wet unless your umbrella gets blown away, and then you get blown away and you get wet. You cannot have a disaster without the human impact. This cyclone is listed as killing 174 people with 81 missing. These death tolls tend to be underestimated. We can certainly say with confidence that several hundred people were killed or directly became casualties. And the damage which they estimated was on the order of about 2 billion euros. So 2,000 million euros of damage, which is more money than iron, but it's actually not a lot. That number 2 billion, the level of subsidies which governments give fossil fuel companies every year is about 500 billion euros. So the amount of money, 2 billion, is basically spare change compared to how much our tax money is funding private companies exploring, extracting, and selling fossil fuels. So 2 billion euros is not a lot of money. The money is going from governments to fossil fuel companies. Nonetheless, it's a lot of money for me, and people who are affected generally don't have billions of euros to throw about, and obviously having a couple of hundred people die is not good. So how does this disaster, this cyclone disaster, actually compare to others? Well, we can say, oh yeah, India is such a poor country, isn't it? And we must be so sympathetic towards these poor Indians. Except that 2005, Hurricane Katrina struck supposedly the richest, most powerful country, the US, and it is listed as killing 1,836 people. Although again, there were probably a lot more. So a tropical cyclone disaster killed 10 times as many people in the US as it did in India. Maybe we should stop being so patronizing towards India. Maybe we should stop trying to compare developed and developing and recognize that every country creates vulnerability. Every country makes their poor people suffer the most. And every country lets tropical cyclone disasters and other disasters happen when they could actually reduce that vulnerability, especially when we consider the cost. So 2 billion euros for the cyclone hitting India. We're talking 120 billion euros damage from Hurricane Katrina. So major tropical cyclone disaster, what happened this year in India was really nothing compared to what happened in the US in 2005. On the other hand, people will say, well, there's a huge rich-poor gap in both countries. There are problems with corrupt governments in both countries. There are problems with resource allocation in both countries, but there still are differences between them. So how fair is it really to compare the two cyclone disasters or even the two cyclones? When we compare the cyclones, in fact, Hurricane Katrina was very similar to the one that we're talking about now that hit India. So the highest winds were very close. At landfall in Louisiana, it was high category 3, bordering category 4, so very similar to at landfall on India. So the cyclones were actually very comparable, even though the cyclone disasters were so far apart. But this is not the first cyclone disaster to hit India. So where can we look back? And I mentioned that year 1998, this one being the 5th strongest in the Arabian Sea since 1998. Because in 1998, another cyclone hit not quite the same area in India, but very close. And that was a lot weaker. Those winds were only 165 kilometers per hour, with the 1-minute gusts up to 195 kilometers per hour. So almost at Katrina's level, but not quite at the level that we were talking about recently, the cyclone we're talking about now. The minimum death toll in 1998 was 4,000. It was probably up to 10,000. So we're talking 10,000 killed in a weaker cyclone in 98 compared to a couple of hundred killed this year. And the damage was actually very similar. We're talking about 3 billion euros in 1998 compared to the 2 billion this year. So there's something very interesting going on here. The facts on the cyclone do not match well with the number of deaths, and the number of deaths do not match well with the damage. It's almost like the level of the cyclone doesn't really link to the casualties or the damage, which is so intriguing because this comes to the heart of disasters. That, as I said earlier, a disaster only happens when people are involved. And I threw in the word vulnerability. So for a disaster to occur, we have to have the environment doing something. The tropical cyclone, the earthquake, the tsunami, the virus, the landslide, or the storm. We've had plenty of viruses which did not shut down the world. We've had a coronavirus pandemic which did not shut down the world. This was 2002 to 2004. Recent, some of you on this call probably remember that. SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome. Yet another coronavirus comes along and we shut down the world. Because a lot of it is with respect to our lack of preparedness, the way we respond, and how we treat people. It's not about the environmental hazard per se. And it's the same with a cyclone. A weaker cyclone can cause worse damage. If we have the strongest cyclone on record in the Arabian Sea, but people and ships get out the way and it never makes landfall, we have a huge cyclone and no disaster. The definition of disaster, the cause of disaster, is that it does not come from the environment, not the cyclone, not the earthquake, not the tornado. It comes from the deaths and the damage. It comes from us. We do not use the phrase natural disaster because disasters do not come from nature. To understand disasters, including this cyclone disaster, we need to understand this element of vulnerability, why vulnerability happens and where it comes from. And in the same way that the hazard, the definition is what the cyclone does, vulnerability is a political process which puts people in harm's way without measures to deal with it. If you're rich, you're online like we are, you get a cyclone warning, you pack up your valuables, you hop in your private car and you evacuate inland. You spend a week at a nice hotel, No big deal. You come back and you phone your insurance company on your iPhone and say, my house just blew down. Can you give me money to repair it? And you repair it if you're rich. If you're poor, you cannot do a single one of these actions. So the disaster does not come from the strength of the wind or the amount of rainfall. The disaster comes from the fact that some people have an iPhone and some do not. The fact that some people have a private vehicle and can stay in a hotel for a week and some do not. The fact that some were able to think, oh, should I really buy my house or flat here? Because, I can see on my map that there's a floodplain and I have a choice. Or are you forced to live on the floodplain because that is the cheapest land available? This is why poor people tend to get hit worse by disasters than rich people. This is why the disaster is not natural. All of these actions, who is poor, why they are poor, the parallels between India and the US, which I mentioned before, the corrupt governance, the inability to manage a storm, the challenges with putting people in vulnerable situations, none of this links to the cyclone. None of this links to climate change. So the cyclone disaster is not occurring because of climate change. It is occurring because of how we treat people, the inequities, the resource allocation, the discrimination, the oppression that we create. Not that we're throwing out climate change. We are changing the climate rapidly and substantively. That should stop. That's not good. But what does climate change actually do to cyclones? It doesn't affect vulnerability. It doesn't affect the disaster. But what's it doing to the hazard side? What's it doing to cyclone? Well, a cyclone comprises 3 components. 2 of them are water. One is rainfall. One is sea flooding, known as storm surge. So the cyclone circles round an eye. Within the eye, there is low pressure. So you often see a storm being described by the pressure. That pressure in the center of the eye is low, so it sucks the sea up. When that raised sea hits a coastline, we see that as sea flooding, which is called storm surge. So the 2 water hazards are rainfall and storm surge, and then the third one is wind, where we're talking speed and direction. Climate change is increasing the intensity of rainfall, wind, and storm surge. So we are seeing tropical cyclones, which are absolutely stronger because of human-caused climate change. But what difference does that make for vulnerability? If you cannot deal with 2 meters of flooding, you can't deal with 2.5 meters of flooding. If your roof is going to blow off at 150 kilometers per hour, it's going to blow off at 180 kilometers per hour. Conversely, if you properly connect your roof to your walls, it's not going to blow off at 180, 200, or 250. If you can deal with water, seawater or fresh water, whether it's 2 meters or 2.5 meters, you can deal with it. So even with climate change increasing the wind and the water and cyclones, it still doesn't affect a disaster unless the disaster is going to happen anyway. So the fact that the cyclones are increasing because of climate change is neither here nor there regarding the disaster. Climate change is also affecting the number of tropical cyclones, and it's actually decreasing them. There's a couple of complicated global geophysics issues which explain why human-caused climate change is reducing the number of cyclones. Though if we experience one cyclone every 15 years, maybe we've forgotten about it and we're not prepared. Whereas if we experience one cyclone a year, then every year we get ready for it, it's not a problem, we can deal with it. So decreasing numbers of cyclones can actually make the disasters worse if we choose to become complacent and stop preparing. Although again, it's coming back to us, right? It's about us preparing. It's about us thinking about vulnerability or not. The other thing which climate change is doing to tropical cyclones is it seems to be making them slow down. So, you'd get it forming in the Arabian Sea or the Atlantic Ocean. It moves along, it hits the land, and then dissipates. But it's actually moving slower, which means that when it makes landfall, it drops much more rain in the same location. So again, it's increasing that rainfall, it's increasing the water. And we definitely saw that with Hurricane Harvey in 2017 in Texas. Over Houston, the amount of rain that they received was just incredible, absolutely excessive. And a lot of that was increased because of human-caused climate change, in that the hurricane moved slowly, dumped rain, circled around slowly, dumped more rain, and then moved off. Yet despite the record rainfall hitting Houston in 2017, the number of deaths in Hurricane Harvey was less than the number of deaths in Tropical Storm Allison in 2001, which hit Houston. So just like India, we have this phenomenon in Texas where a much worse storm causes much less damage. So even with human-caused climate change, making the storms more intense, it does not mean that the disasters are going to be worse, because it's up to us. The disasters are us. The disasters are not natural. The disasters are about vulnerability. Now, does this mean that we shouldn't worry about climate change? Well, I hope you all can answer that appropriately. What it means is that for most disasters, we should not be blaming climate change. And it was the same with the Western European floods, which killed over 200 people across 3 or 4 countries over the past month. So many people were saying, well, this is climate change. This is a climate change signal. But it was the same as hurricanes in the US. It was the same as cyclones in India. Not a single part of that flood disaster in Western Europe could be linked to climate change, even though we know the rainfall was a lot worse because of climate change. And in fact, every single place which was flooded, which I've looked at in Western Europe, has flooded many times before in previous centuries. So we have to be very cautious about saying the reasons why we do need to stop climate change without exaggerating regarding rhetoric about disasters which are attributed to climate change, but which weren't caused by climate change. If you do want to be scared, and if you do want disasters which are caused by climate change, and this absolutely applies to the west coast of India and to the south coast of the US, and I'm afraid to London, heat. Climate change is right now pushing heat waves into regimes which we cannot survive. Particularly when it does not cool down at night, letting our bodies recover, we are going to see thousands of heat-related deaths directly linked to human-made climate change. And this is terrifying. A hurricane, a cyclone, neither here nor there. Like I said, we're only talking about a couple of $1 billion damage, only a couple of 100 deaths, not really a big deal. When we start seeing 10,000 deaths in one city from human-caused climate change through heat and humidity, that's when it starts getting difficult. And if you're an outdoor agricultural laborer, as many people are in the southern US and in India, if you're a construction worker, if you have to walk 3 kilometers to get water or to get to work, then that heat is going to kill you. Even in northern India, in the foothills of the Himalayas, we're starting to see a lot of farmers in situations where it's simply too hot for them to manage their farms. So to be concerned about human-caused climate change, forget the storms. Focus on heat and humidity, because this is going to be the devastating and terrifying disasters. But not to end on a negative note, I'll directly address that question in the chat, that our master's programs are entirely interdisciplinary. We do not seek a specific background. We do not seek a specific first degree. So in the Global Health Masters, we have people who've been doctors or nurses for 20 years. We have people who are coming from physics or chemistry who've never thought about health and development before. In our disaster masters, we had one person where her first degree was music therapy. We've had others who haven't done math since their early years of secondary school, and yet they're coming in to do a master's which has fairly intense math in it. So we have no prerequisites, we have no requirements for the master's degree in disasters or health. What we're looking for is passion, commitment, ability to learn, willingness to teach, and a desire to say, too many disasters are happening, too many people are dying, there is far too much damage. Here is how I want to become a professional to stop that. And with that level of commitment, with that attitude, you will do fine in the masters no matter what your first degree is. And that's what we hope you get out of it, and that you then go into the world and do so much better to stop the horror that we are seeing, whether it's cyclones in the Arabian Sea, flash floods in Western Europe, or the horrible fires which are right now affecting Greece and Turkey. So thank you, and looking forward to questions, discussions, challenges, and especially to me learning from you.
I think I can speak for everyone that was an amazing talk, and it definitely gave a lot of people maybe a different perspective on how to look at the cyclones. And I think if you have a activism background, I'd say, as I would think most of the participants here today do, you can see the direct link of what Dr. Ilan said to climate injustice. So is the section about talking about being able to go to a hotel for a week, or being in the same place having to face a cyclone. That is a huge combat that poor people do have to face because of climate injustice. So you can join the fight against that. It's just a little bit of promo. You can always join your local Fridays for Future group or Fridays for Future Digital. You can DM us on Instagram or any of our social media platforms, and we'll give you the link to join. But then I think we can start our Q&A session then. And you can do it if you want, if you feel comfortable about putting up your hand, like Shiram is doing there. You put up your hand and then you can speak it out yourself, or if you're not comfortable with that, you can put it in the chat and then someone will read it out for you. But I think then we can get started on the Q&A. So Shiram, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Dr. Kelman, I'd really appreciate it for coming out with us and offering your insights. And I really liked your speech there. So my question is regarding your opinion on mitigation strategies, and how effective do you think it would be to inculcate public interest on such matters?
That's up to us. What we do have is a whole host of success stories where it's been done. So I can relate two anecdotes quickly, particularly related to floods, actually both related to cyclones, where it has been done. So the first one is Toronto, Canada. In 1954, Hurricane Hazel slashed through the city, killed over 80 people, and took out numerous houses which were right beside the river. Now that in itself should be a warning: right beside the river, hurricane rain, river flood, dead people. Don't build beside a river. So in the aftermath, Toronto said, you know what, we cannot have this happen again. What we are going to do is stop residential development in the floodplains and turn the rivers into nature and recreational ways. So those two rivers, which were the site of catastrophe 3 generations ago, are now absolutely gorgeous, lengthy, recreational, environmental education, nature reserves in the middle of a megacity. And Toronto actually markets itself as a city within a park. So people remark how green it is and wonderful bike trails, and you can watch deer and you can see salmon swimming upstream in the autumn. But very few people in Toronto know it occurred because of a disaster. And the other good news story is Bangladesh. So 1970, a Bay of Bengal cyclone hit Bangladesh, killed 500,000 people. This year and last year, the cyclones which hit Bangladesh killed only dozens each time. That's a remarkable journey in 2 generations, from a devastating calamity to, we don't want several dozen deaths, but to a large extent, it was people impacted and inconvenienced rather than a country being flattened. And Bangladesh has done that locally. They've done it through local warning systems, through local sheltering systems, exactly what you're saying, ingraining the population to want mitigation and to avoid a disaster. And their program is a lesson to the world in what can be done. So 2 examples. And the question in the chat, how poor people are more affected by disasters. Do I think the current systems can carry out climate justice and equal resources in response? I hope it would not be in response. I hope it would be to prevent. Unfortunately, we're very good at preparing for the disaster which just happened. But again, it goes back to the good news stories. The fact that even India, right? The 1998 one killed 10,000 people. The 2021 people killed a couple of hundred. Not great that people are suffering. Not great that we still had that damage. Not great that we still had people dying. Not great that it happened in the middle of a devastating pandemic and a lot of people have died from COVID because of poor evacuation. But that's still a lot better than 10,000 dead. So this is showing how we can respond appropriately. We can support people from a justice and equity perspective. And even though they are still disasters, we do have these good news stories, whether from India, but particularly Bangladesh, Toronto, and many other places. So Heather, who do we want to call on next?
Sluka, do you want to go next? If we go in order, if they're going down, it might be the easiest.
Okay, so I have a question and a clarification. I'm not sure. So the first question is, for the places where they've been built like years ago, for decades ago, and if they want to prepare themselves for the flood or a cyclone, then how can they work on it? They can't really break down all this infrastructure and build it again, right? So what are the ways to curb those disasters?
This is a justice issue. If you have resources, then my response as well as your responsibility. Go online, learn what you have to do and do it. And it might be raising your dwelling so that the flood water goes underneath. It might be getting insurance. It might be trying to build some form of park nearby so the water runs off into the park. But this is all for us who are privileged. The vast majority of people cannot do that. And so there's not a lot that they can do. This has to start with the governments allocating resources appropriately, implementing justice, ensuring equity, and helping people who cannot help themselves so that they get to the point that they help themselves. Ultimately, disasters are actually not about the disaster. They're about the long-term justice issue. And if people were able to help themselves, then there'd be no concern.
Yes, and another thing, you talked about how the poor people usually settle down in the places where where the land is actually very easily available for less money. So it's usually the plains and all regions, right? So if we look back to the previous settlements, they have all settled in the plains or nearby rivers. So if that, I mean, how does that even make a difference for people who are living right now?
A difference with respect to what?
I mean, if they've survived through that, I mean, why can't we survive through it right now?
Oh, yeah. And that's where the traditional and local knowledge comes in. The point you just made, never forget it. Because exactly as you're saying, some of the people who are actually the poorest know how to live with floods. And again, staying in this South Asia region, the Char people of Bangladesh are an excellent example. A lot of people come in and say, oh, they're getting flooded, they're so poor, we have to help them. But they actually live with the moving river, they live with a flood. So that's where we need to learn from them. Now, this does not justify their poverty. This does not justify the inequity and oppression which they experience. What it does show is it's about helping each other and learning from each other. And in fact, I can address one other question on that point, which came up in the chat. about drought. And the question was, how about droughts? Again, there's a lot of, including actually in India and Bangladesh, there's a lot of indigenous local knowledge about coping with drought and dealing with drought. So yes, higher heat because of human-caused climate change is making droughts worse. By respecting and using local indigenous knowledges, we can actually learn so much and do so much better. We should probably go to an oral question, and then I'll address a coconut tree in the question in the chat. Who should we take for an oral question?
Farzana, do you want to go next? She's from Bangladesh, so it'll.
Oh, you can teach us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Actually, first you inspired me to go for my master's in disaster management, and thank you again for actually promoting our next global strike, because in next global strike we are actually our main focus is intersectionality and how climate justice is intersectional with so many other injustices. And my question is like, you said that less cyclone is a climate problem. Can you just elaborate how actually it works?
So there are two main mechanisms which are decreasing the number of cyclones because of human-caused climate change. The first one is global. The reason why cyclones happen within certain latitudes, so they don't happen at the equator and they don't happen at the poles, the reason that they happen in the middle latitudes is because they are ultimately driven by the difference in temperature between the equator and the poles. The poles are colder than the equator, so there's heat transfer or heat movement from the equator north and south, which then leads to storms rotating. The poles are warming faster than the equator, so that temperature difference is becoming smaller, and the heat movement driving the cyclones is becoming less. The other factor is more local. When a cyclone starts rotating and forming, the winds go up into the part of the atmosphere called the stratosphere. So the bottom layer is called the troposphere. There's then a clear divide, and above the troposphere, we get the stratosphere. What is happening is human-caused climate change is making the winds in the stratosphere much stronger. So when the storm starts forming and rotating and goes up into the stratosphere, it gets cut off by the stronger winds. So it's much harder for storms to form. So those are the two main factors in which human-caused climate change is actually decreasing the number of cyclones. So there's a lot of complicated geophysics involved in this, and a lot of complicated interactions from the global right down to the local level. Simultaneously, the oceans are getting warmer. Heat from the oceans to the air helps drive the circulation of the storm. So when a storm forms, it gets driven with much more power, which is why it's more intense. It's from the heat in the oceans. But for that to happen, the storm has to form, and storm formation is becoming inhibited because of these other factors. And yeah, vegetation slows down water. Vegetation can be very useful to protect infrastructure against storm surge flooding, against river flooding, and against tsunamis, up to a limit. Because if the tree breaks, then it becomes incredibly dangerous debris. So your house might withstand the water and be taken out by a couple of trees. You may be able to keep your head above water if you're caught in the flood or the tsunami, but then a tree which is broken off hits you and you go unconscious. So it's this balance that at lower levels, vegetation and trees in particular can really help to reduce the severity or the force of a flood. But if that force is too strong, then it will take down the trees and the trees become dangerous.
Thank you. Actually, I have another question, which is like, you said that climate change is not directly connected with cyclone, or okay, climate change is not, but can we actually say that when there is more rainfall and sea level is getting higher, then water flows in the country and there is flood, and there is also salinity, uh, especially in the southeast part of our country. So isn't it also connected to climate change?
So yeah, so this is where we start getting all these complicated knock-on effects, that the direct link between climate change and the cyclone is clear, but between the cyclone disaster is not so clear. When it comes to sea level rise, there are several different mechanisms which create sea level rise. Most of the mechanisms are not going to bring the sea level up that much. So they're really not that much of a concern. The real issue and the dangerous issue is if the Antarctic or Greenland ice sheets collapse. And that will be absolutely catastrophic. Then we're talking maybe 40 meters, maybe 80 meters, like a high-rise building, a Sears high skyscraper, that level of sea level rise. And that is going to take out coastlines around the world. But if that happens, it will probably start in about 50 or 60 years. And it will take 200 or 400 years, somewhere in between then, to actually fully reach that height. So we have a long time to be ready and to prepare for it. The sea level rise, which is happening now, and which we know is going to continue for the next 100 years, is not going to put seas higher than they have been in the past 10,000 years, basically modern humanity. So the sea level rise this century is not that much of a concern. The calamity is if the Antarctic and Greenland ice sheets go, and then we have 300 years of problems. The salinity issue is a big local concern, in that even a couple of centimeters of sea level rise or a bit more intense cyclone can then contaminate fresh water. And this then makes crops more saline, it makes them more salty, which leads to major health impacts like hypertension and like problems with pregnancy. However, most fresh water is contaminated anyway. You know, I'm sitting in London, I can drink the tap water because it's treated. Doesn't matter how salty the River Thames in London gets, I can drink the tap water. So no matter how salty the water gets in Bangladesh, if we had appropriate treatment, then it wouldn't be a concern. We wouldn't have all these health impacts. And it's the same with effect on crops. Many people have crops in the tidal zone. It's salt tolerant crops, and those exist. Again, there are issues with hypertension. There are issues with pregnancy if we ingest too much salt, but there are other dietary adjustments which can be done, especially if we treat the drinking water. So a bit of salt is a problem if we do nothing. The concern, of course, is that we do nothing, and so people have problems with salt.
And then maybe if we just take maybe two more questions. So Julie has one in the chat, but first, if I'm very sorry if I pronounce this wrong, but Ina Maria, if you want to go now.
Sorry, yes. Hi, I'm Ina, and I just, my question is, do the cyclones increase desertification? Because I'm looking at Madagascar right now. I'm from the Southern Hemisphere, I'm from Namibia. And you know, when we look at Madagascar now, which is undergoing a serious drought, and obviously, because we never really get news of what is happening outside of the global north, I am just wondering, could it be that the island has been turned into a desert because of cyclones as well? Does it have an impact on that? It's just my mind trying to make sense of things.
Yeah, I mean, all weather is connected, but a drought specifically linked to a cyclone does not work. What the cyclone does is it brings rain, it brings water. Having more cyclones does not necessarily mean that you're sucking up water from elsewhere, because there's always water in the air, there's always humidity. And when it rains depends on that level of humidity surpassing a certain level. What climate change is actually doing is it's speeding up that water cycle. So we're going to get more intense rainfalls and more intense droughts in the same location. It is not that the storm leads to the drought. It is not that the drought leads to the storm. It's that they're all part of the same water cycle. They're connected. And climate change is moving. So you may get the same amount of rain or even a bit more, but it's much more intense. It happens much more quickly. So both your droughts and your floods become more intense.
Okay.
That is only the drought or the flood. That is not the flood, drought, or flood disaster.
Okay.
Knowing that droughts happen anyway, knowing that floods happen anyway, we can and should deal with it. But Madagascar has its own government issues, its own corruption issues, its own colonialism issues, and that's why it's had a couple of really bad cyclone disasters in the past decades, and why the drought at the moment is absolutely horrifying. So to Julie's question, is anyone involved in researching and studying cyclones by looking into measuring cyclones by their effect on humanity and the disaster they caused, as well as focusing on wind speeds, so it focuses on people? Disaster research does this, absolutely, but we need a lot more. So please come and join us. What we often lack is trying to do a number analysis, a quantitative analysis of how poorly or how well the cyclone characteristics link to those human and disaster characteristics that you're mentioning. So I gave some examples where I said the wind speed was this, the flooding was this, the deaths were this, but we actually need a really in-depth study doing that systematically around the world. So yeah, fundamentally the answer is yes, we do that, but we need a lot more. So please come and join us and help us learn.
We might just take one more question. Sahil, if you want to go, and then I think we'll move on to our lovely cahoots that are in relation to Cyclone Tauktae and a bit about what Dr. Ilan said.
Hello, am I audible? Hello?
Please go ahead. I can hear you.
Yeah. Actually, I was wanting to ask that I'm from Mumbai, which is like city of more than billion people living here and which experience the toughest cyclones here. And you will see about 80-story skyscrapers on one side and people living in slums on the other side. So it's surrounded by the sea on almost all sides. So how can we protect ourselves and what will you suggest the government to do the actions against the calamities happening?
The key is exactly what you said, people living in slums. As soon as they're living in slums, they're in trouble. And not just from cyclones, not just from flooding, but the potential earthquake, potential land movements, and if they're on the sea, potential tsunami. So what can we do? What should the government do? Justice, equity, stop corruption, stop oppression, stop marginalization. All of those points apply to the UK government also. I mean, the level of corruption in this country that we have to deal with. And there are people living in informal settlements around London also. And you know, London doesn't get excessive storms. Occasionally a cyclonic type storm goes through and causes a lot of damage. There was a major one in 1987, for example, but ultimately, you know, it's not as bad as many other places. The people who get hit, and there was flash flooding last week in London, the people who get hit are the poorest, the ones without the resources. So it is nothing to do with the flood, the drought, the storm, the landslide, the earthquake. It's to do with how we treat people, and we have to do better.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I think that we had loads of amazing questions, and I think then, unless you have anything else to add, Dr. Ilan, I think we could move on to our cahoots, unless there's anything you'd like to say, closing remarks.
No, I'd just like to say thank you for the questions. Thank you for being here. And again, for your passion, but also your passion for evidence, as well as ensuring it's evidence-based action. As I said at the beginning, it does not stop here. Please connect, please get involved. Keep on asking the questions, but also ensure that you are giving much better answers. Thank you for it. And
Thank you very
I'll
much.
stick around in the background in case there's anything more. I'll probably have to leave in about 40 minutes.
Yeah, no, stick around for all the time. And then, as Iris has put in the chat, we're just about to play our Kahoot. So they've just after sharing the screen now, so you can join. The game pin is, I'll just pop it in the chat. So. There she is.
Is anyone else joining?
And don't worry if your screen does say you're in, it's just we just have to wait to start it and then it'll go on to playing it.
Yep, that's how this works.
If anybody else wants to join now, and then we'll see who is the Cyclone wizard or Cyclone expert.
Sorry, I think I accidentally stopped sharing screen for some reason. That was weird. Okay, if no one else is joining, then I guess we can start just so we don't take forever. So just let me know if you have any issues with seeing anything on the screen. Yeah, just make sure that you look back and forth at the Zoom screen and then your Kahoot screen. So let's start. 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Okay, there's 9 questions. Was Cyclone Tauktae more enhanced than past cyclones? This should be pretty easy. Alrighty, get your answers in. And you can also join midway. The game pin is always there in the bottom there. Yes, it was more enhanced than past cyclones.
And just as a little PS, most of the questions in this relate to what's in our toolkit. So remember to go check this out after. You can find the link to it on our social medias, or it'll be in the chat at the end anyway.
Yeah, alrighty. So Sima's on top, and then we have Raxi and Ava and Luisa and Julia. Go, y'all. What was the maximum wind speed of Cyclone Tauktae? There's one in miles per hour, another in kilometers per hour. Yeah. Get your answers in. Wow, only okay, so most of you were decently correct. Let's see who's Raxi is on top, and so is Heather and Julia. Let's go. If we don't take action against climate change, cyclones will only become worse over time. This one should be pretty simple. Yes. Is it? Yes. To those who said no, that's the right answer.
As we learned from Dr. Ilan, the disaster will just become worse and worse if we don't take action.
Answer streak. Let's go. Heather's climbing up. Raxi is still on top. Let's go, y'all. Let's see who was paying attention. And that's the correct date. Congratulations to those who got it right. For those who got it wrong, those are the correct dates. Yes, it was in May, and the damage is still there, and it's already August. And Raxi is on top, and Jonavi is making her way up. Woo. Yes. This is why Kahoots are fun. Trigger warning, death. How many people died as a result of Cyclone Tauktae?
It was saying Dr. Ilan's talk.
So. A mood for Kahoot. Sometimes I'll be on the top and I'll just like drop instantly. Yes, there were 174 deaths, unfortunately. Oh, Julia has taken over Raxi, and Luisa is the highest climber. Let's go, everyone. In Gujarat, how many homes were damaged because of Cyclone Tauktae? Yeah, it's really hard when you're doing it on your mobile device. It's best for like the computer, I'm not gonna lie. Or if you have like your phone in your computer, because like I don't know how many people like use Kahoot. It seems to be a very American thing, but like we like do it in school where like the teacher has it on the screen and we have it on our own devices, but it's also fun for quiz games in general. Raxi's back on top. We have 3 more questions. You all got it. Days later, another cyclone hit. What was the cyclone's name? Cyclone Ya, Nas, or Nas. I don't think I'm pronouncing this correctly, but those are the options. Yes. Cyclone Yas. Oh, Ava has an awesome streak. Let's go, Ava. Alrighty, which areas did Cyclone Tauktae hit? This is a pretty easy question. I mean, if you get this one wrong, I will lightheartedly laugh at you. With love, with love. Where's, yes. Yay, everyone got it right. Let's go. Thank you to everyone who got it right. We are all about South Asia. South Asia, South Asia. Oh, Ava's on top. MJ is making a comeback. Let's go. Okay, last question. You all got this. Which one is the odd one out? I do specifically remember talking about this. Which one's the odd one out? All of these have similar meanings except for, yeah.
They're all the same thing bar one. So
Yeah.
they're all in this, yeah.
Yes! Most of you all got it right. Let's go. Y'all were paying attention. Let's go. And the
Those are the
Cyclones top to
winners.
the podium. Third place, Raxi, 7,000 points, 7 out of 9. Thema, 7,432. And first place, Ava! 8 out of 9. Congratulations. Oh, our runner-ups are, are Jonavi and Anthony. Woo! Congratulations
Well
to
done, everyone.
people. Y'all are awesome. And to everyone else who played, I hope that helped you remember things. Woo!
Well done, everyone. And then I think the next thing on our agenda today is to take a picture. I'm not sure if, hopefully most of you, when you were doing your strikes today, you had your posters about our campaign. But if not, we'd love to see them. Mine was created minutes before this. So mine's not very good. I might have to take my background off for it to take the picture. But if anybody would like to I'm going to take a screenshot now of the webinar. So if you're comfortable with your camera on first, turn your camera on. If you're not,
Actually, let me just, okay, but if you haven't made your sign yet, you can do that now. I think maybe we should give people some time if they haven't already.
yeah.
Okay, how about if you have made your sign, put a star in the chat, like this. So see, like I have a sign.
Let me turn off my background so I can show you how bad my sign is.
Yes.
Okay. This is my sign. It's on a whiteboard. So I'm going to, while everybody else is doing theirs, I'm going to start doodling on mine to make it all nice and pretty. And then I'll make a proper one.
Round off for your sign to work.
Noise.
Yay! Thank you, Twarita, for turning your camera on and showing us your awesome sign. Let's go! Yeah. Not blown with Cyclone is one of our hashtags, so please do use that in your sign. And if you're comfortable, turn that camera on and show us your sign. Overthrow the Cyclone. Yeah, let me turn my camera.
With some.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for turning your camera on, Farzana. Not blown with Cyclone. Love to see everyone else. Oh, hello, Sahil. Thank you for turning your camera on and showing us your climate action now sign. Yay, more people. Let's go. Thank you, Julia. Good to know you have made your sign. Okay, you don't have to hold it forever. Just you know, we will wait. We will wait for people. Thank you all so much for your patience. Y'all are amazing. Yay. Hey, MJ, nice to see you with your sign. I see you, Julia. Uproot the system, let's go. Yeah, don't look. Even if you don't have a sign, it'd be great if you could turn your camera on, just so we could take a picture, like, to show how we had so many awesome people involved, you know?
Hey y'all, just to interject, if you don't have a sign, you can do the mappa sign, which
Oh yeah,
indicates
this map a symbol.
it is like this. Like you can just do this and like show you and give a smile.
And smile.
Okay, and like any
Hey,
climate action sign is welcome.
let's go. Let's go. We
to
can
see
do
that
this. We can
action.
do this. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Hey, we are looking better. Hey, yes, everyone has. Yes, that's a lovely sign. Alrighty, do we want to take the picture now? Is everyone ready?
Hey everyone, turn your videos on if you have a sign, or like even if you don't have a sign, please turn your
Heather left. Wait,
and do the
wait for
mappa
Heather.
gesture.
Heather, we must have you in our picture.
Oh God, I'm so sorry. My Wi-Fi went. Always does.
Fine.
Okay, will I take it or no?
Yeah, it'd be great if you could take it.
Okay. Press the many buttons. Can't find the S. Oh God, computers are confusing.
Yeah. Computers are confusing.
Okay, I got it.
You
There
got
was a few people on the way, but Wi-Fi went. And then you can send us individual ones as well, because tonight I'll be
make
up.
sure to post a
making
picture with
lovely
your sign
sign.
on Instagram or Twitter, and tag us, tag FF Digital, and
you can put it in our collage that'll hopefully be going up tomorrow. And you can DM it to us as well and tell everybody.
Yes. Tiny.
And remember to use
screenshots. I'm not sure how to. Let me try. How do I send this? I don't know how to send something in the chat. I mean, like a file.
The file sharing has to be enabled. Zoom does permit file sharing in the chat, but not all systems allow it.
Oh, how do I enable that? I didn't realize that.
I'm not techie at all, so I have no idea.
Okay, I'm gonna try to look at it right now, but everyone here is us. No, let me just go to my account. My account.
I think then once that goes in, we're finished. And I think then, unless Fraction has any, well, thank you everybody that came today, and to the people that we lost along the way, we're sending out thank you to them, because we actually had, I think it was around 91 registrations, and we got half of that. So that was amazing. We were not expecting that at all. We had expected maybe 40, 50 registrations, but we had so many. So thank you for sharing it and also coming.
Yes.
Can I post this screenshot on Facebook and Instagram? Unless anybody has any, if anybody doesn't want them to, put it in the chat now, but I think we should be fine. And then Marshinda, do you want some closing remarks?
Yes, thank you everyone for coming in this webinar, and yes, share our toolkit to learn more. And if you want to go through our research sources, like our team had really worked hard on that resources, collecting them and putting them all together. And yes, the most important thing is the fundraiser that we are doing. So it'll be great if you could share it to your schools or college, universities, to any adults that you come across, and persuade them in donating or chipping small amount will do will work for them. Yeah, that's all.
And also, just I forgot to say, we're hopefully you should go check out the Fridays for Future Digital podcast, because soon enough there'll be an episode about this campaign about Cyclone Tauktae, and we have amazing guests from the local groups that helped us on this campaign. And then we have Shiram that was here earlier talking about the science behind the cyclones, and then I talk a bit at the end about the campaign. So when that comes out, make sure to look at our social media, because it'll be announced when it's out, and have a listen to that. And then I think we're finished and we can all go. Have a good day, morning, evening, or night, wherever you are.
You all are incredible. We really appreciated this time you spent here to be with us.
And continue to fight for injustice.